this highest wisdom that Sri Krishna describes here requires receptivity. But why do we want to be more receptive? When we drive down the street, when we open a newspaper, when we look at almost anything on the internet, we're assaulted so many times by many things, advertising being one, and our minds get overloaded and our senses overstimulated. There's so much mental noise around us. And don't we just want to turn that off, protect ourselves instead of opening ourselves, being receptive? And the answer is that when we still the mind, all that mental noise fades into the background and our senses become calm. It's only in that inner calm that our hearts open up to be able to receive in a new way, the soul receptivity. Swamiji said once, many students of yoga make the mistake of thinking that by their willpower alone, exerted through daily practice of pranayama, asanas, and meditation techniques, they will attain cosmic consciousness. They approach the spiritual life as if God were a mountain to be conquered. The secret of effective yoga practice is deep love, steadily increasing receptivity to God's light and grace through deep, humble love for the Lord. The goal of yoga is to deepen one's receptivity by stilling the body, mind, and emotions, thereby making oneself more sensitively aware of the movement of divine grace within. When I first learned meditation, it seemed a mental exercise to me. I would practice a technique and I would get some results. But it was pleasant, but it was totally in my own mind. And then I heard some bhajans, and they did not speak to my mind. They spoke directly to the feelings in my heart. And the first times that I heard the names of God in Sanskrit or hearing one of Yoganandaji's chants in English, my heart opened. I felt for the first time I started to develop a devotion. And these bhajans brought a sweetness and a sense of completion and joy into my life. And this is the deep love that Swamiji talks about. And meditation was more of a challenge for me. At the same time, when I could feel the stillness in the bhajans, then I could transfer that stillness into my meditation practice. We're surrounded all the time by many radio waves in the air, but we can hear them only if we have a receiver, only if we have a receptive radio. And then we need to discriminate and choose what station do we want to listen to. Is it the news station? Is it the rock music station? Or do we want to tune in to the consciousness of the Guru, to a higher consciousness? And how can we have more of this attunement that Yoganandaji talks about in this reading? More of that receptivity. We have to consciously make room for God, make room for that. And when we clean our closet, we can't make room for something new until we get rid of something old. There's the rule that if you buy a new article of clothing, then get rid of an old one out of your closet. And we need to remove the limited consciousness of ego. Rajarsi Janakananda, Yoganandaji's chief disciple, he said that when ego steps out, God steps in. And when God steps out, then when God steps out, then the ego steps in. And there's no room for both of them. And when we remove the doubts that paralyze us, that block us from our further progress, then we make room to attune with God. As Sri Krishna told us, to those who worship me with love, I set a light in their hearts, the lamp of wisdom. And the more we offer that love, the brighter is that inner wisdom. Yoganandaji, it was Swamiji who said that I used to pray to Master, teach me to love you as you love me. One day, Master looked at me penetratingly and said, how can the little cup expect to hold the whole ocean of love? First, it has to expand and become as big as the ocean. And so the more that we can expand our consciousness, the more that we can feel this flow of grace that is always there, that is our divine birthright. Thank you.
Good morning. You know, there are certain aspects of the spiritual path that can unlock all the mystic truths of the spiritual path. And just as our reading of what Yoganandaji would say to his disciples, attunement. Attunement is that master key that will unlock all the doors of the spiritual path. Attunement can give us the power to become like these great masters, like Lord Krishna, like Rama. And what is that power? It's the magnetic pull of God's love. When we think of Yogananda's saying, the spiritual path is 25% our own effort, 25% the grace of the Guru on our behalf, and 50% the grace of God. So what is our job there? Our job is to be open and receptive to that 75% grace that's flowing to us all the time. Attune ourselves to that grace. And that's what we need to do with 25% of our own effort. Attune ourselves to that grace. And how would we do something like that? You know, we think of Krishna and the Ras Leela. What's he doing? He's dancing with the gopis, but he's the lead. He's the lead dancers, and the gopis are following. He plays his flute, and everyone attunes to that note. That is the note that I'm going to follow. We have large choirs within Ananda around the world. And it's the choir director that says, this is your note. And we all attune ourselves to that note. There's the melody, there's the harmonies, and all the different parts attune themselves to one note. And then we sing together in perfect, hopefully, perfect harmony. And the result is a beautiful vibration of Swamijis, of Yoganandajis that can go out and change the consciousness of those listening. And you think of the great symphonies, the maestro gives the main note for all the other instruments to follow. So that's what attunement is and can be. And we think of God's love calling us home. What do we do? How can we follow that love? The story of Saint Francis of Assisi, one of the most well-known Christian saints from the 13th century. He was contemplating God and his Guru Christ when he heard the voice, Saint Francis, rebuild my church. And he looked around and saw this crumbling chapel in front of him and thought, oh, I'm being asked to move these boulders and these rocks and start rebuilding this chapel. And so he started. But his heart was saying, what can I do? And as he was moving those rocks into place, other brothers that was started to follow St. Francis helped him to rebuild that chapel. And it was just the first step of what his guru was really asking him to do. And what he was really asking him to do was rebuild from the inside the whole Catholic movement with charity, with humility, with love and kindness, as opposed to sort of corrupt priests and a lot of power and money as it was being ruled from Rome. And so that's what each of us can do. Ask, what do you want me to do? And this can be our first small step of faith that helps guide our spiritual path and bring us to soul awakening. Just one small step. That's our 25%. We must put out that self-effort of 25% with humility, with love. And God, the Guru, Divine Mother, will guide us. And that's why Swami Kriyananda always said, say yes to life. Because when the thought comes, or when a Guru Bhai asks you, can you do this? Say yes. Because God needs channels to help guide us on the things that that the Gurus are asking us to do. Krishna says, just offering me a leaf can be the very beginning of deep, deep devotion on the spiritual path. And just that leaf can also just be a very tiny, tiny spark that will light the fire of devotion in our hearts. Swami Kriyananda didn't have devotion, he tells us, because he was so intellectual and logical and used his reasoning mind all the time. And his guru, Yoganandaji, said, chant more, develop your devotion. The spiritual path and life will be so much more wonderful if you do. And Swami chanted his heart out and thought, and became even proud of his devotion. But Master said, look how I'm changing Walter. So we do what they ask. Open our hearts to receive their consciousness, their guidance, and then they can come in and change us. So yes, we have to take the steps, but that's opening ourselves to let them come in and change us. And if we can't feel ourselves as a bhakti yogi, I've never felt myself as a bhakti yogi, more of a karma yogi. But the more that I serve, the more I feel that love for God, for Divine Mother, for the Guru flowing through me, because I can feel them guiding my life. And so maybe we don't even know who our Guru is, or don't feel that close connection to any particular God or to omnipresent spirit. We can think of God just as a friend and offer our love to a friend. And that can be our first step of developing that devotion that will help God in His love draw us back more and more to Him. Swami Kriyananda, of course, was very devoted to his master, Yogananda ji, and by the end of his life said, I hope every thought that I think is coming from my Guru. He was so attuned to his Guru that the melodies of the 400 songs that Swami wrote would just come to him. And speaking of the highest wisdom, the discernment, Swami not only offered a leaf so that his Guru could come and give him discernment in order to make all the right choices in life, but Yogananda gave him the highest wisdom. In a few short weeks, he could just download from Yogananda deep, long, philosophical, spiritual books. And so when we open ourselves in that attunement, they can change us. And I think now of Ananda Sangha Delhi. When Keshava and I first started coming to Delhi, we didn't know what we were doing. We said yes, of course, to starting a meditation group or starting some meditation classes in Delhi. We had no idea what it would lead to. But step by step, we kept saying yes. And then when the time came to have a permanent home in Delhi, it just so happened that Divine Mother gave us a wonderful student who offered her home to be used as an ashram. And so we don't know what will happen with our 25% by just taking one step after the other. We have no idea where this road will take us. But if we're open to receiving the magnetic quality, the magnetic pull of the Guru's love, of God's love, it will take you somewhere that our heart and our soul is longing to go. If any of you get our newsletters, you can see all of the different activities that are being offered, or if you're on any of our WhatsApp groups, look at all the things that are being offered. There was a silent retreat last weekend. There were nature activities in the park yesterday. We're going to be starting, many of us are starting a 9-day cleanse that Yogananda gave us. These are all different devotees offering their lives, offering maybe not their lives also, but just saying, yes, let me do something that will help others. And so they're putting on these programs. They're leading the healing sessions. They're leading the pranayam during the day. They're leading the meditations in the evening. They're guiding the Hindi home study. All these souls, they're probably your friends, have just said, what can I do? And they listened. And now, as they do these programs and these projects, the masters are giving them the power to become the sons of God. They're becoming the instruments of our gurus. Wisdom is flowing through them. Discernment is allowing them to make these choices in their lives. These souls are glowing. Their lives are changing. And so that's what all of us can do. We can say yes to taking those first small steps, give our 25%, and see how our soul can be awakened. I'm going to end with this reading by Swami Kriyananda from Promise of Immortality. And Swamiji says, what is the power of receptivity? It is the gift of love. In pure love, the heart's feelings are no longer centered in oneself, but in the object of one's love. We assume to ourselves the characteristics of those we love. Actually, we attract their state of consciousness, their magnetic quality. If we love an enlightened master and are attuned to them, we receive their state of consciousness. The salient features being, first, a complete lack of ego, and second, divine love. The magnetism emanated by a master lifts his disciples above their egos. Once ego limitation has been demolished by selfless love, nothing remains to prevent self-awareness from expanding to infinity. And that is our destiny, if we have soul receptivity. Joy to you.